Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our webinar entitled Empowering Human-Centric Digital Evolution Through Trust. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the lands on which we meet today. I'm coming to you live from Sydney, Australia, which is the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders joining us on the call today. So we're living through one of the most fast-paced, unpredictable times in recent memory, where technology is evolving faster than most of us can keep up with, and the pressure to adapt has never been greater. But there's one thing: new tools and systems keep rolling out. Real progress isn't just about technology, it's about people. And despite all the noise around digital change, many organizations are still struggling because they haven't built the trust, the clarity, or the culture needed for sustainable evolution. That's why today's conversation is so critically important. We're joined by two incredible leaders in Babita Evans-Kumar, the creator of the Trust Code methodology, which helps leaders see through the digital noise, build real alignment, and make confident decisions. And Dr. Gav Schneider, the pioneer, creator, and founder of the Presilience methodology, a proactive, people-first approach to building resilience in a complex world. Together, we'll unpack what it takes to evolve with intention, to go beyond short-term change, and focus on building long-term trust, capability, and confidence at every level of the organization. We often get the words evolution and transformation muddled up. Transformation often implies a one-off or disruptive change, whereas evolution is more about ongoing growth, adaptation, agility, and learning, which is what we are here to talk about today. The way the session is structured today is that we'll kick off with Babita sharing a 15-minute presentation with us, and then I'll invite Dr. Gav onto the stage to take us through what this all means in a presilient world, helping us to understand what presilience is. After that, we'll all have a fireside chat and put all of these ideas and thoughts together before we close off the session in just under an hour's time. The Q&A box is there for you. The session is about you and asking the questions that you want to hear. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box throughout the session, and we will get to them as the session goes on. But without any further ado, let's get the session underway. And Babita, over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Indeed, I'm honored to be presenting alongside Dr. Gav and Dave. Thanks to all the esteemed members of the audience who have taken time to join us. We are navigating through unprecedented change. It's like holding a tiger by the tail. In a world where fake news and misinformation is prolific, we must choose to protect ourselves from catastrophic disruptions. This is not about innovation. It's about survival. Reflect on our understanding of AI just 3 years ago, 2022. As Donald Rumsfeld has aptly stated, but there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we truly don't know. What unforeseen developments might the next 3 years bring? For the next 15 minutes, I will talk about how Trust Code offers a practical set of tools and techniques for human-centric digital evolution grounded in clarity. Before I start, let me pause and ask a question. Do you remember the moment you were betrayed professionally or personally? Let's reflect. How did it feel? Did you truly recover, or did you just carry on a little more guarded than before? Here's the truth. The moment we choose to trust a person, a system, a process, or an organization, we open ourselves to the risk of betrayal. It's the ones we trust most who leave the deepest wounds. A trusted future must begin with clarity. Seeing through deception and hallucination is critical in the digital era, and we must uncover deception. The layers of deception are pretend reality, synthetic data, and fake information that imitate real threats. They waste resources and undermine trust in alerts. Example, conspiracy theories. Perversion of reality. Malicious signals disguised as safe interactions lead to underestimating risks, creating security gaps. Example, bank fraud. Smoke screens and red herrings. AI reacting to illusions and noise, mistaken for threat. These create overreactions and operational inefficiencies. For example, a simple employee activity can get flagged as a major threat. Our goal, however, is to get a faithful representation of real threats seen clearly. The goal is timely detection and response. Trust first, built on clarity, is all about identifying noise before it distorts perception. It's important to detect imitation before it becomes default. It's also about recognizing signals that no longer reflect reality. At this point, I would like to share with you some statistics on systemic failures with digital transformation across the globe. A high-level snapshot of systemic failure in digital transformation reveals pretty sobering figures. 80 to 90% of Gartner's 14,000 client enterprise customers are not doing digital transformation. They're simply doing digital optimization. Approximately 70 to 80% of digital transformation fail to meet their objectives across all sectors. Another research from McKinsey reveals that 74% are not successful. Now, lack of leadership, lack of alignment, digital literacy, etc., are some of the top reasons. Now, let's be honest, naming the problems isn't the same as solving them. We can't replace every leader. We can't wait for that perfect alignment. So, how do we stop leaders from becoming blockers? By creating a space for the conversation no one wants to have. It's about discussing fear, digital literacy gaps, problem solving, and decision making. This is where the trust code matrix comes in. It's a practical framework to bring clarity and accountability into the room where it matters the most. It's about ensuring trust drives transformation and real issues are finally addressed. The trust code matrix is a simple yet powerful construct. The x-axis captures digital insight and competency. The y-axis captures an individual's natural inclination to trust. Some people trust easily, others don't. Each quadrant reveals a distinct mental state of trust readiness, helping us understand how we personally engage with transformation, systems, and one another. With this matrix, we can easily map the cybersecurity into zero trust, where trust must be earned, not assumed. Taking time to reflect on where we stand across the key components of transformation, like decision making, stakeholder relationships, and vendor dynamics, gives us a clearer picture of our trust posture. whether we are operating from a strategic trust, informed trust, or cautious skepticism. The trust code matrix helps us with greater awareness, not assumption. One may argue and say that this could be covered by risk assessments, but this matrix brings clarity to our trust posture. The compliance competency matrix is an iteration of the trust matrix and supports both self-assessment and leadership calibration. On the x-axis, we have digital competence. On the y-axis, we have regulatory compliance. This illustrates that even the most traditional compliers who are tech averse can become blockers when it comes to digital transformation because they don't have first-hand essential knowledge of digital transformation. Without hands-on knowledge, even simple decisions like choosing between tools such as Jira or Rally can be protracted, can take more than 6 months. And one practical approach is to run parallel short-term pilots, 3 to 6 weeks, with both tools involving cybersecurity teams to assess trade-offs. This enables informed, timely, cost-effective, and secure decision-making. The idea is obviously to move people from these quadrants into the more acceptable ones. When used for self-assessment, individuals may overestimate their abilities, but the tool still drives engagement and takes us a step forward towards collaboration and performance. For leadership, it offers a structured way to evaluate and benchmark talent across teams. It's also about the leadership team evaluating their own skills and capabilities. But this comes with a word of caution. To be effective, the matrix must be applied with sensitivity and strategic intent, not just as a political tool, but as a genuine mechanism for nurturing organizational trust. Who would you trust? Would you trust Dr. Chris with all his expertise, or Mabel from Facebook or Instagram to perform a surgery on your child? Now, unlike other industries like construction, where there are standards for skills like architecture, electrician, plumbing, etc., technology sector is heavily unregulated. There are no standards for coding, development, etc. Legacy IT operations are like an Uber ride, whilst cloud transformation is more like a plane journey. Right now, the market is flooded with individuals who hold certifications but lack real-world experience. It's like putting an Uber driver in a pilot seat. Flying passengers from London to New York, the plane may taxi down the runway, and the stakeholders might believe that the project is off to a successful start. But the truth is, it's never going to take off. These are often false starts. This is one of the key reasons digital transformations fail: a lack of suitably qualified, experienced professionals. The SQUEP principle is rooted in the nuclear industry. It ensures only qualified and experienced people lead critical work. And digital transformation should be no different. In digital transformation, relying on underqualified individuals is risky. Now, I'm not going to ask everybody if you know about the famous Dunning-Kruger effect, but if you want to know more about it, it's all in my book. This reminds us that inexperienced rookies lacking self-awareness can be more dangerous than we think. Just being certified with theory knowledge and no experience exposes us all to risk. What's needed in the workforce is a balance of resources, a balance of experienced leaders, skilled, qualified, experienced professionals, certified professionals, and early career talent. The silver workforce also brings experience. They can teach things. They can teach the new members of the team how things are done. They bring ethical judgment and a depth that younger members of the teams may lack. Without this mentoring, the younger generation will not develop into leaders and thinkers of the future. This blend delivers resilience and protects ethical decision making in high stake environments. The intergenerational blend of experience and competency in the workforce is key for building organizational resilience. And as you can see, Trust Code revolves around trust and people. People, leadership, and technology are converging. 70% of transformation is about people, culture, and politics. 20% is about leadership, and 10% is about technology. Technology is secondary to people. That's why I have created a 6-book series, each focused on the critical pillar of digital transformation, designed to equip leaders with a human-centric mindset needed to drive meaningful, lasting change. Because real transformation does not start with tools or technology, it starts with people and trust. When we say 20% of transformation is leadership, what does that really mean? Well, it means 10% of it is direction and governance. Leaders lead with clear mission, vision, purpose, values, strategy, market positioning, and brand. They also influence and engage with workforce and ecosystems by establishing good ways of working, behaviors, policies, regulatory compliance, standard operating processes, reward mechanisms, and communication. Now, why is this important? This is extremely critical because to build trust by design, we need to uncover the landmines which pose threats. I'm going to cover 2 of these: ways of working and policies. Now, did you know that only 6% of companies have policies for responsible AI use? There are some good examples of companies like Microsoft who have the Office of Responsible AI to ensure oversight, to escalate concerns, and guide policy enforcement. And did you also know that 38% of the employees share sensitive work data with AI tools without the employer's knowledge? Now, this is a massive Trojan horse for organizations in the regulated sector. One good example of an organization dealing with this effectively is IBM. It uses data loss prevention and zero trust architecture to monitor unusual activities and block sensitive data from being shared with external systems. A proactive trust and resilience posture enables us to recover from any disaster. This resilience approach helps us to do a V-shaped recovery, where we bounce back quickly and effectively. Our goal must be to avoid a suboptimal U-shaped recovery, or worse, an unacceptable L-shaped recovery, where the system ultimately fails us. For technology to be trusted, traceability and source integrity are not optional features. Every tech output must be traceable, transparent, and tamper-proof with digital watermarks. Because trust isn't given, it must be built, protected, and proven. Here are the 6 forthcoming titles in the Trust Code series, set to be published this summer. Thank you for your attention, and now I'll hand it back to Dr. Gab and Dave.
Thank you, Babita. And what a nice opportunity to be able to highlight some of those key ideas that you covered there. Dave, I wasn't sure if you were going to jump in there and just link this, but I'm happy to keep going if you'd like.
No, absolutely. I definitely wouldn't want to hold you back. But before you do jump in, I do just want to highlight and firstly thank Babita for that very enlightening session. That was really, really a wonderful session. Babita, before you carry on though, and before you leave the stage, there is one question that has come through from the audience. And James has asked the question, where do most organizations go wrong when trying to implement trust frameworks at scale? I think that's quite a relevant question when we're really trying to make a difference here. Any thoughts on that?
First of all, James, thanks for the lovely, that's a very poignant question. We have to start small. I would suggest a local adoption with a small pilot group and see how it pans out, and then scale it up. The first and the foremost element is the Gilding Coalition, getting stakeholder buy-in and making sure that the stakeholders are truly in the trust game.
Fantastic, and thank you for that, Babita, and we'll circle back to some of the other questions a bit later as we go on. But Gab, now let's take a look at this from a Presilience perspective. So firstly, a hearty congratulations on the new book that's just been released, the Presilience book. I've got my copy on my desk, so I suggest you head over to Amazon and get yours. So secondly, there's a reason that your book has been #1 on Amazon since release just over a week ago. The world wants what Presilience is. The question is, why does the world want it? What is it all about? So let's take a step back. And for those viewers and listeners that aren't familiar of this term Presilience that we've been talking about, let's start off with what is Presilience and why is the world so desperate for it now?
Thanks, Dave, and thanks, Babita. So, Dave, I guess just to start off and answer the question, and then I'd like to link this to some of Babita's comments, because part of the fundamental challenge we're facing right now is that if we just look at technological innovation, adaptation, and change in the last 3 decades, so that's 30 years, we've seen so much change that most humans can't keep up. And even technologists struggle when they are outside of their specific area of expertise. It's not a simple challenge for us to overcome. Part of the problem, again, is that the human brain can only deal with so much input at any given time. And equally, we're in a world where efficiency and the idea of do more with less quicker is something that affects almost everybody in their working environments. So it's not as simple as simply going, hey, let's just get people to trust each other and everything will be okay. There were a few things that Babita mentioned, ranging from misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and the challenges we have to trust that makes it incredibly difficult for us to be able to get sustained high performance in a way that really works. So a drop of history, and then I'll link this together. I started teaching the psychology of risk postgraduate program in late 2015. And through that program, we kept asking our graduates and the people who attended that program, why are you here? And almost all of them, particularly those who were already in C-suite jobs, were very frustrated. And they felt that it was really hard to get people to understand the upside of risk as opposed to how do we make sure bad stuff doesn't happen. So there was this imbalance and negative bias, which again, when you understand how the human brain works a little bit, most of us are wired towards negative information when there's a chance that it could save me pain. The next challenge we've got, though, is not just this idea of how do we get a positive frame, but how do we engage people? How do we get people to want to make the best decisions? which led us down a journey of this concept we like to refer to as risk intelligence. And how do I develop this RIQ, this ability to make the right decision at the right time and get the outcome that I'm looking for? As opposed to what most of us land up doing is we put a lot of effort into the decisions that are not that important, and the really big decisions often overwhelm us. In a corporate environment, we've gotten smarter, right? We look at large data sets. We try and get as much data and factual information to make decisions on. But we forget a few things. Most of that data was inputted by humans that need to be used by humans, understood by humans, and translated by humans. So part of the challenge is, even though we are moving incredibly fast, and anybody who's played with generative AI or large language models knows just how quickly we've gone from, ChatGPT 1 or 2 that barely worked to a plethora of AI and Gen AI options in the modern day that'll solve a myriad of problems. The challenge we've really got is, how do humans function in this new ecosystem, and how do we get the best out of them? So I think there's two problems to look at. Problem one is, how do we ensure humans can cope with the rate of change? Problem two, once we ensure humans can cope, is how do we get the best out of humans? What's the point of all this incredible technology if we're not seeing happier, healthier, more functional and cohesive humans functioning? In fact, we've actually seen the opposite to a large degree, because never before have humans had access to the world's information live time, anytime they want it, via the internet. And never before have we seen people so easily able to spread false or misleading information, particularly when we start looking at things like social media, and now with the misuse of generative AI tools, deep fakes, and the ability to put together documents, pictures, information that really looks real, is a massive challenge for us. So into the world of presilience. Up until now, we've worked primarily on two main operating attitudes or systems in most corporates or organizations. They've either been compliance-centric, where the idea is I need to meet all the rules and requirements that I have to, and I need to meet them at just the level that's good enough to keep a regulator or any other compliance authority happy. We found in a period where we were before this adaptation and huge technological change, we were able to cope better. Things moved slower. We had more certainty and more control. In the era we're in now, where systems are hyper-connected, and if you just think about it, there are so many examples. COVID slapped all of us in the face because we tackled one risk, being a health risk, and in many countries broke social cohesion, broke financial infrastructure, broke trust with governments, etc. Look at something that happened last year, the CrowdStrike issue, where not malicious as far as we know, but an error in terms of operational patching and improvement of software processes led to many of the world's airports and a lot of our supply chains being disrupted. So we are now in a state where we are hyper-connected and interconnected. And to be honest, as long as we're technologically reliant on the way we interact, this is what's going to be here as the new norm. So the question then comes to, if compliance was good when we have control and certainty, what do we need next? The answer was supposed to be resilience. We need to develop individual, team, and organizational resilience. And I've got to say, about 10 years ago, I really loved that idea. I loved the idea of the intersection of risk and resilience. And if you get those two things working in concert, do we get sustained high performance and great outcomes? And the more we researched it, the answer was sometimes. So occasionally, compliance and resilience will solve your problems and get you where you need to get to. Still, generally, only when we have high degrees of control and high degrees of certainty. Thus, we started to work on this idea of presilience, which originally focused primarily on proactive prevention of the things that would absolutely destroy your life or destroy your business. But as we worked on it, we actually identified a cycle. And the before phase is interesting because it happens before your event, but it also happens after the event again, before the next thing happens. So there's actually two opportunities to insert resilience. One in proactive prevention, and two, after an event where we want to make sure we bounce forward, not backwards. So when we actually look at how this works from a digital trust perspective, we have to realize that the users of our digital architecture and our digital infrastructure are humans. And if we want the users to have a great outcome and a great experience, we have to understand the impacts, one, change has on them, two, the risks that come, both negative and positive, because I don't think anybody will put something like social media in a box where they go, it's only bad. There are many positives. Yeah, I just look at my ability to stay connected with now what is quite a large global audience. It would be incredibly difficult to do without social media. But equally, I think everybody knows that feeling where you get a LinkedIn request, for example, or a Facebook connection or whatever it is, and you're not sure if it's a bot, a real person, somebody impersonating someone else. It's a big challenge. So what we really need is a balanced approach and a mindset that looks at taking the best of compliance, the best of resilience, and then being able to apply this presilience mindset to achieve sustained high performance and not just get through a disruption, but actually turn disruptions into opportunities and actually be able to capitalize on them. So in looking at how this all comes together, when we've worked primarily with the human side of software changes, system transitions, process changes in large corporates, often clients bring us in to look at the risk side of that and the human performance side of that. I can say with a lot of confidence, the failures have very rarely been on the technologist side. They've been on the people side. How do we message this correctly? How do we get people positively predisposed to what we're doing? How do we train them to use these new tools in a meaningful way? How do we identify the downsides and also show them the upsides? How do we sustain that change? And then how do we create benefit out of it? Most organizations understand this and apply some sort of change management methodology, but their change management methodology tends to be rooted either in compliance or possibly in resilience, particularly when we look at digitization and digital assets. The resilience component often lands up being data storage or the ability to back up my data regularly and easily, as opposed to actually, if I look at my entire organization as an ecosystem, I need all aspects of my ecosystem to be performing well. So if my technology is excellent and I've bought the right software, the right hardware, I've had the right experts install it in the right way, I then need to build the right processes, which is another area of failure because often the processes are built by the same technologists and they are designed for a technologist to use it and somebody who's usually quite familiar with the product as opposed to the random person who is actually hurting because they're used to doing something a certain way. Even if they didn't like it, that change causes stress. So it's fascinating when we actually look at, we could do this stuff a lot better. And I think that's the linkage between what we're doing and Babita's trust index. If we're able to start building more trust with each other, with ourselves, and we understand how digital transformation works, this is far easier to do when it's done right. The challenge is a perception that if we do it fast, we do it cheap, we let the software engineering side of it dominate, and we also sometimes let the software provider drive the change, and then we get surprised why humans are not interacting. We also need to remember that many, many people, and not everyone, but many people who got into the world of cyber and tech generally are people that don't always like working with other people. They love working with machines, with code. They're often self-motivated and don't need to be part of a large social group. Again, that's a generalization. There are lots of different flavors, but we need to remember that we're catering to a broad audience. And one of the fascinating pieces is that, as far as I know, we've got more generations in the workforce today than we've ever had before. So we've got all the way from boomers. Now soon we'll have Gen Alphas entering the workforce. So you've kind of got 5 generations. Some of us were actual digital migrants who never grew up with the internet and hardly used computers till our late teens, maybe early 20s. Others were absolutely bored with this tech and it's easier for them. And that's something we really need to understand, that digital transformation and digital change needs to be adjusted for who is the user and what do we want to get out of them, which again are human-centric pieces. So with that, I'd like to just close off by saying there's a lot of work to do here. Trust is critical, as is the way we make decisions. If we can't get good at both of those pieces, we're going to continue to get disruption that hurts, as opposed to disruption that creates more and more opportunity. The challenge is, how do we change our individual mindsets to create a better outcome for all of us? The short answer is read my book and come and do our training. But there's a bigger piece to that. And that actually has to do with looking at what are those critical success factors that make something work. And it's not just tech, it's not just process, and it's not just people. It's the integration and balancing between these. We have a term for that. We call it dynamic risk equilibrium. And one of the things we want people to do is achieve the dream, but actually get the dynamic risk equilibrium applied and managed in a really meaningful way. Then we can actually move forward in a real sustainable manner. And we need to also look at this idea of sustainability, not just being about the external environment and the climate, but also about our people and our systems, and ensure that we're not breaking one part to fix another. Thanks, Dave. That's probably enough for me to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Gavin. Babita, you guys have certainly set the stage for a wonderful conversation. So I invite you all to bring your virtual chairs around the campfire. Let's have a drink and let's have a chat around the campfire about putting some of these concepts together. Unfortunately, we've only got 20 minutes, so it's literally going to be high points and bullet points. What we want to do is try and give our audience as many pragmatic takeaways as we possibly can. But just a couple of questions before we dive in. Babita, here's one for you from the audience. The question reads from Dan. Babita, can you share some of your real-world examples of some of the work you've done addressing the challenges of digital literacy at the leadership level?
That's a great question, Dave. And thank you very much for that question. So one of the real-world examples is when I was working in a highly regulated nuclear sector, we were faced with COVID. In this instance, the customer had 4.8 million customers, and the 25,000 workforce could not access their systems, and COVID happened. And they had never done Agile before. They were only used to traditional gates and waterfall methods. And the 110 leadership team wanted to adopt Agile. Now, the beauty about Agile is it's doing Agile. Can you be Agile? Is it theory or practice? Agile is practice. So one of the things I did was looked at their action list. They had 750 actions that they had to implement to give access to all the 25,000 workforce. What I did was consolidated it, took out the duplications, so the list whittled down to 125. And then I got the teams together to make 5 Scrum teams. And we agreed that these are the actions that each of the teams would do concurrently rather than everyone trying to do everything. And there was a lot of resistance and fear, like, how are we going to do it? We've never done Agile before. And one thing I asked them was, hey guys, have you used LinkedIn and Facebook? And they said, yes. I said, using tools like Jira is exactly the same. You tag people, you delegate something, you update what you have done. That's what it is. And there was a little bit of reticence. There were lots of individuals who actually told me that they felt like, will they be able to cope with this? But hey, we started the program, and within 3.5 weeks, we were able to deliver what other companies took 6 to 9 months. We now had evangelists for Agile. I think when it comes to digital literacy, it's actually helping people to understand how easy it is. Now, one thing we need to remember is people who've been with the organization, long-standing employees, they bring a lot of wisdom. They bring a lot of relationships with the customers. They've been responsible for building the future of the company. We can't leave them behind. It's about bringing them together with us. And when you give them that support and nurture them and show them how things can be done, it becomes easier. Sending people on courses is not the answer. It is holding hands and learning on the job. And this is what I called just on time, on the job, accelerated mentoring. That works. So digital literacy for me is about really helping people, really being there for the individuals and explaining to them how different tools can help us move the needle north.
And that really leads us into a great segue. Thank you for that, Babita. I'm not sure if you've all seen, there's the famous curve which shows high performance versus trust. And who would you rather have in your organization? Would you rather have, obviously, we'd all want well, hopefully not too many unicorns, but obviously we'd want the person with higher degree of trust and a high degree of high performance in our organization. But if we had to choose, and if we had to compromise performance over trust, what would we compromise? And I think we could all agree that we would all compromise performance over trust within our organization. But with regards to, and you just touched on one of the points right there, Babita, with regards to training not being, the silver bullet that's really going to do everything. And mentors need to be holding hands through their teams. Gab, if I could turn to you for a second, what are some of the things, and just, I understand that this is a much bigger question, but if we want to support ongoing, meaningful digital evolution, digital transformation in our teams, where should leaders focus on first? What's one or two critical steps that they can take now to start building their trust and human readiness in their approach?
Great question, Dave. Thanks. So the short answer to that is to set a culture that is actually capable and able and ready to cope with the world we're in now, not the world we came from. Because if you've built the right culture with the right operating methodology, values, and alignment, it doesn't matter what the change is, your people are able to deal with it. So part of the challenge we've got at the moment is we've spent decades building people to do a job. And what we have learned is that people tend to want to do more than one job now. We've changed. The world has changed. There's the ability to move from job to job, skill to skill. Most of our corporates haven't quite understood that yet. Government departments are struggling with that too. So the challenge we've got now is the skill set humans actually need to thrive is a lot more generalist than it used to be. So we still need specialists, but as generative AI learns and continues to learn, it will develop the specialist knowledge we need. The application of it will sit with humans. So we need to make sure humans are able to apply this stuff. So the one single, honest, biggest thing people can start with is building the right culture. And if the culture is right and the people are aligned, and that's both vertical and horizontal alignment, it doesn't help necessarily to only have vertical alignment, where everybody only follows the rules and the instructions of those above them, because we know the best innovation actually comes from the front lines, not from the top down. So if we want to be able to cope and thrive, we've got to think a bit differently. So I think that part is really, really important. There are a whole bunch of other things around sustainment, but primarily sustainment has to do with a lot of what Babita was focusing on. It's got to do with the way people demonstrate and the way they become exemplars. And then it has to do with the way the trusted spreaders of culture in organizations treat whatever the change is. And we often get that wrong. We often focus on the people that say yes, and we think they're the easy wins, but they're not the people often that others in the organization follow. So you need to understand who those natural leaders are, who those natural influences are in your organization, not just look at a linear approach. The linear approach does work only when you have high degrees of control and high degrees of certainty. If you don't have that, you have to adopt an approach very similar to what Babita put on the table there, around small, efficient teams, well-led, well-structured, mentoring support, and an overall cohesive plan to get this going, as opposed to just looking at one linear approach. Thanks, Dave. There's a lot more to that, but I'm conscious of time and wanting to discuss other pieces.
Absolutely. And I know we're going to be jumping around a lot here and don't really have the time to deep dive into one particular point. But Babita, I want to bring you up here and just talk about your work that you've done with the Trust Matrix and the deep dive into how we process signals in noisy, fast-moving environments, because that's essentially what we're dealing with at the moment. So what are some of with the context of presilience and proactive prevention and early detection, what are some of those subtle ways organizations lose trust without even realizing it? And what are some of the subtle signs that leaders can identify and spot to address early?
Dave, thank you very much. I think it is all about resilience, as Dr. Gav talks about. It is about being proactive. With trust code, with the trust matrix, how can we actually apply it? And when we talk about tech, let's look at construction as a sector. Everybody is very clear what architects come and do, what the plumber does, what the electrician does. There's a lot of clarity. We all know what needs to be done, how long it takes. But when it comes to technology, it's unregulated. It's almost like a black box. Nobody knows what's happening behind it. What does a UX UI designer do? How many codes can a software developer write in a day? Now, if you go to someone who doesn't have experience of it but is managing the budgets, they are relying on secondhand information. Sometimes they're relying on vendors. They are, right now we see in large global organizations, they have a rainbow team. When I say rainbow team, it means multiple vendors working together. Now, is it in the vendor's interest to deliver something that takes 5 days in 5 days? It's a question. Is it in their interest? And the collaboration between vendors, what happens there? So what we are saying is there are lots of moving parts when we are trying to implement digital transformation. And with that comes a lot of vendor fog, issues that are linked with collaboration between vendors, how the program is progressing, updates, dashboards. What's the real truth? What's true? And what's the truth? And what's not true? What's misinformation? I think this is where, when you use the trust matrix, you can just see that which vendor do we trust most? And is it a strategic trust, or is it informed trust? Or are we blindly trusting this XYZ vendor because we've been working with them for 10 years, 20 years? I'm just giving an example here, but also within teams. How does one team relate and work with the other team? Is there trust? Is there mistrust? Now, of course, trust is a life cycle. We start with no trust, and we go on to the peak trust. And if trust erodes and conflicts are created, because conflicts are nothing but fractured trusts, and this is what we need to address. And this is where the trust matrix comes in, because we say, okay, hey, what's our trust posture? What's the relationship with our vendors? What are we missing? And when we look at those weak spots, we can address it. Is our decision based on trust?
So that's
where
really,
it was.
That's really a great segue there. And there's a whole lot more to unpack with what you've just said there now. We could probably have a webinar just on that point. But just to go into the conflict resolution aspect of it that you touched on there, and Umisha's actually asked the question, and Gav, if I can bring you into it, and then Babita link it back to the trust code. So the Presilience framework deals a lot with conflict resolution and problem solving in the workplace, right? Let's start off with that methodology, and then we can link that back to trust. How important and what are some of the fundamentals about conflict resolution in the workplace? When we talk about trust, my late grandfather always used to tell me that you spend your lifetime building it and can take a second to break it. So, conflict resolution is a very important aspect of it. It doesn't mean to say trust is necessarily broken, but we need to tread on it very carefully. So, Gav, from a Presilience perspective, what does that look like?
So I think the first comment on that is the mindset. Because if we want to look at conflict as a bad thing, we will always look at conflict and go, that's a negative, how do we remove it? But we don't have high-performing cultures without some layer of conflict or challenge. We need people to be able to tell us your idea is bad, or if we tweak this idea this way, or the way you're doing that is not safe, which requires somebody to be able to take an oppositional view. So any high-performing organization has a healthy level of conflict. What we want to be doing is ensuring we have alignment, and that whenever we have conflict, the conflict is still in alignment with what we're trying to achieve. In other words, we are both arguing so vigorously because we both want this thing to succeed so damn much. That needs to be the driver. With that in mind, then, this is where trust becomes the glue. Because if we don't trust each other enough to value each other's opinions, we don't get a positive outcome. So fundamentally, as a lot of the audience who knows risk to solution might know, we do a lot of work in the de-escalation, conflict management, violence prevention space as well. For me, we want to become master communicators. But if you look at the way we build the Presilience model, it starts with self, then we look at others, then we look at the organization, and eventually, hopefully we can transition this to societal outcomes. But if I understand myself and I understand you, we have a far better chance of effectively managing conflict. If the organization understands itself, understands its teams, and understands its people, it has a far better chance of removing unnecessary friction and ensuring that when conflict happens, it happens for productive and positive outcomes and meanings. So it is a foundational piece. And I'm hoping that Umesha, who asked the question, is starting to see that this is a lot more than just going, hey, is this a tool that could help X? It's got to be a bit broader. And we actually have to look at how do we build something that's sustainable, not just for a once-off, but actually improve performance on an ongoing and continuous basis. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Gav. Babita, let's link that back to trust code, conflict resolution, and how that can be managed through trust. From my perspective, it's a critically important aspect of it. I don't believe that you can resolve conflict without trust. What does that look like to you?
See, I think Dr. Gav literally said it. We've got to be great communicators. It's about humanity. It's about being human. Now, when trust is broken, it's between two people or two parties. We have to look at it from a human-centric point of view. When trust is broken, you have two options. One is to end something completely and part ways. But the other option, which is a realistic option, is to rebuild the trust. How can we rebuild the trust? How can we be more human-centric? As a human civilization, we need to realize that we have sufficient resources in all spheres. People can go fast or people can go far. If you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And going together means, as Dr. Gav mentioned, it's about having a balance of constructive conflict. It is good to have conflict, but good, experienced leaders are able to manage that healthy conflict and to take people with them. And it's about wealth creation and not just about profiteering. When we're talking about wealth creation, both the parties will benefit. It's about win-win for both the parties. It's about being human, understanding, because as Dr. Gav said, both the parties have their own stories. They each bring what's true to them. But it is about taking them together with the real truth. And it's about taking the team with you in an organization, in an ecosystem. And this can be applied not just to organizations and teams. You can apply this to your family. You can apply this to the society as well. And Dr. Gav has nailed it, when he says it is about being that leader, being that communicator. And we need authentic leaders who are those translators, those communicators who bring people and resolve conflicts, because conflicts are fracture of trust. Thanks, Dave.
Sorry,
Dave, you're muted.
Babita, we're making a good team.
It had to be one of us. So I'll take the fall for it, no problem at all. As we start to wrap up and really put this together, unfortunately, we've only got 3 minutes, so I'd like to keep it short. If this was for anyone else, if this question was for anyone else, it would probably be a tough question. But for the two of you that have really dedicated your lives and dedicated your beings to making a meaningful difference in people and organizations, I'm going to throw it at you anyway, right? what I'd like you to please do is come up with a 3-step process that you would recommend for our audience to go back and consider. Step 1, do A. Step 2, do B. Step 3, do C. And from that, you can then start to work to what you believe good might look like and what you would like to see. Now, noting that that might not necessarily align to the organization, but what does good look like to you? And what is a 3-step approach that would assist us in getting on the road to getting to where good might look like?
Dave, as you know, I'm a risk guy. So normally I want more context, more information, more variables, and more details before providing guidance.
Understand this may be causing you significant cognitive dissonance, but go for it.
It does, Dave. And for those who know me, I hate giving checklists that won't work, because too often then people rely on the checklist and want that to be the solution. But pragmatically, step 1 is start with yourself. If you don't know yourself and you don't know how you make decisions, high performance for you is going to be tough. Step 2, seek to understand others and what drives them and motivates them. Step 3, align those 2 variables. And at the very least, you can achieve high performance for yourself and for those around you. And Babita said it beautifully, like these things are not just for high-level corporate. Who doesn't want a high-performing, cohesive family? Who doesn't want a great performing group of friends? And so if you don't think these things are as relevant in your corporate environment, use them for the things that count most to you. I would hope that, if you're listening to our webinar, that you do care about your career and you also want to do well there. But most failures happen because of this disjoin between what I think and what you think and what we think the organization wants of us. And if we can align just those 3 things, we are far more likely to get sustainable high performance and reduce risk in a meaningful way, whether it's digital or other. Thanks for the challenge, Dave. I'm excited to see what Babita says.
Well, I think context is absolutely critical. But the first thing is, when you look at the trust matrix, obviously you want to change something. So you're at current state and you want to get to a desired state. And the discovery is, what, where, how, why, you ask the 7 whys, and then you can get there. But look at the trust code matrix and say, where do you see yourself? Do you trust yourself? Do you trust your decisions? How do you relate yourself to others? It could be your family. So it's the layers of trust as well. And again, all this I have covered in the book Trust Code. There are lots of illustrations as well to help you understand what are the layers of trust, what is the life cycle of trust, and how you can actually apply the trust matrix and the competency and compliance. At the end of the day, we are all on this journey. The whole human civilization is on this journey. We are marching on the era of AI dominance. And each one of us has to ask, where am I heading? What do I need to do to be digitally literate? How do I keep it is about survival. It is no longer about innovation. And I think we need to realize that and work together. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Babita. And the 2 of you rose to the occasion splendidly, as I knew you would. So as we wrap up, we're completely out of time now. So as we wrap up, there's one thing that is critically crystal clear. Digital evolution isn't about chasing the latest tech. It's about empowering people to adapt and decide and lead with trust. Tools will come and go, but trust, clarity, and human readiness are what makes evolution and transformation sustainable. So here's your call to action, and here's the challenge I put out to you as the audience. Don't wait for a crisis to start building trust. Start embedding it now. Use the tools and tricks that our panelists have shared with us in the conversation that we've had today to embed into your conversations, your culture, as Gav mentioned it, and to your decision-making. Use the frameworks, apply the tools, and keep asking those really hard questions. Make yourself comfortably uncomfortable. This is how we move from the change fatigue to confidence, connected leadership. And on that merry note, I'd like to thank our panelists, Babita in London, Gav in Australia, and the backstage crew for putting this event together. Thank you for joining us. and let's now go and build trust together. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful evening.